Welcome to ServiceNow Tech Bytes, bringing you an inside look at our products. I'm your host, Steve Miller. Today we're going to talk about the Predictive Intelligence Workbench with Product Manager Raghu Vemuri. It's a new application in the Paris release that helps you add machine learning to your ServiceNow workflows. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, and welcome to our first all-remote episode of Tech Bytes. My guest and my sound engineer and I are all at our respective homes, connected by the internet. Today, I'm happy to welcome Raghu Vemuri.
Hey, Steve. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Before we get started talking about PI Workbench, maybe you can tell us what you do here at ServiceNow.
Sure. So I'm an ITSM product manager for Predictive Intelligence Workbench and the product owner for PI Workbench, which is what we are releasing in Paris. I've been there with ServiceNow since the beginning of our AI ML journey, joined the data insights team around the time when we acquired DX Continuum. That was our first AI ML acquisition. So as far as my team and what I do, we are a small team of product managers and data scientists focused on executing on our AI-first strategy. When I started off, I traveled around the globe, met with multiple customers and evangelized AI and ML, and then later led the Kingston release of ITSM Predictive Intelligence capabilities. Now, basically, I've kind of seen how customers implement predictive intelligence and machine learning, kind of understood what were the customer personas implementing PI, the pain points, and that was kind of the genesis for this product, PI Workbench, which I'll be excited to talk about.
Oh, so you've been on this all the way since the Kingston release. That gives you quite a historical perspective on this.
Yep, I've seen it all, at least through the ServiceNow eyes.
Okay, good. And how about when you're not at work? How do you keep busy during your off time?
Yeah, so most of my time I kind of spend with family and friends, hiking at various destinations around the Bay Area. In the rest of the time, I'm just maybe a technology fanatic, I guess. I don't know. Try to keep up on the technology trends and see how the market is doing.
Okay, well, that sounds good. All right, well, let's talk about PI Workbench then. So this is a new app now for ITSM lineup.
Yeah, so it is certainly a product originated within the ITSM business unit. But as we started off the journey, we knew we want to kind of make it a generic framework with each business unit having the ability to create their own use cases. So maybe what I can do is to highlight what Predictive Intelligence Workbench's goal is and what led to it. I'll probably give a little history on the customer pain points we talked about just before, and then explain you the goal. So with PI, basically the idea was to kind of have a couple of these ITSM use cases, in front of our customers to alleviate the mundane task of triaging for their service desk agents. And all the customer would have to do is to train a machine learning model and integrate it within their ServiceNow workflows. Customers have really embraced it. We really saw their ML and AI champions, who typically are domain experts, platform owners, admins, and they have good social capital in their companies, take it upon themselves to make AI and ML work within their company.
But they're not really the people with the programming expertise.
Absolutely not. And that's, not always programming, and more so, certainly not data science. But one thing we saw, which was pretty encouraging, is they all had a learner's mindset. Right. So what that meant to us is, like, at least during the customer calls we saw, we're pretty impressed with their creativity and the professional pride they take in training the first model, because they don't really have the data science background. It was pretty clear that having some practical help in deploying machine learning in production workflows and managing it over time, communicating the value to their stakeholders and leadership would enhance and build upon the trust they have earned. And that's exactly what PI Workbench intends to do, right? So it helps to change the conversation from a capability-based ML to outcomes and value-based ML in a language that's familiar to the process owners.
How would you describe the difference between capability-based and value-based?
Sure. So when we talk about capability-based, which is what we released in Kingston with PI, it is more to do with capabilities like classification, similarity, clustering. These are all different algorithms and models that we have a platform capability on, and then customers can use their use cases. Whereas a value-based ML is primarily to talk about the use cases. What is that you want to use it for, right? What is the outcome you're driving, and how machine learning can be part of that journey.
I see. So that's a natural evolution then in the product.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's what users were comfortable with, right? So obviously we started talking their language more so than before.
Yeah, that's what they're working with and aiming for.
Mhm.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about the use cases.
Yeah. So when we talk about use cases, we are really talking about business processes. If we talk about creating an incident, we are talking about auto assigning, auto categorizing, predicting configuration items, testing relevant major incidents, things like that. So all these are different ways in which when a customer is creating an incident or when an agent is creating an incident, these play a part in quickly creating it and efficiently resolving the incident. So I can say the advantage we are trying to get with PI Workbench is when we talk to the customers, we heard questions like, hey, you know what, ServiceNow has our data. Why is it not training a model for us out of the box, right? So why do we have to do this configuration? Other questions could be things like, am I following the right steps in the implementation? How do I know this model is the right model for me? And lots of questions around integration and how can these models coexist with the business rules? And can we give some kind of a best practice guidance for the customers as they are going with that journey, see how other customers are doing and help them along the way. So we essentially build these features within the product and we kind of guide them, be it creating an out-of-box trained model or giving the best practice guidance on if a customer is creating an outsourced service desk or has a outsourced service desk, maybe one model for assignment group would be good. If they are creating or they want a use case for self-service incidents, maybe they can create for that just that one contact type, things like that. Essentially based on their data, we are able to recommend what would be the best input fields to create a better model on the next iteration. We saw that customers were typically, or at least process owners, were not typically comfortable tweaking those business rules. So we provided a no-code integration option and also readily giving correlation between the business metrics and the machine learning metrics. So those are some of those feature enhancements we did.
Okay, so it sounds like with this latest iteration, they start off farther ahead with pre-trained models, and it's easier for them to make modifications as they go forward.
Correct. Exactly. Yep. And essentially, by doing that, what's happening is the customers are able to just focus more on the business scenarios as they are talking to their stakeholders, and this will be a good bridge for that discussion and collaboration to happen.
Well, earlier you mentioned the guided setup for creating models. How does that work?
So when we talk about guided setup, really, it's a feature of ServiceNow that typically helps customers in creating or setting up a particular process, and we are using that familiar functionality, although we customize quite a bit to fit machine learning to guide the customer through those processes, right? So different stages of ML life cycle typically are, creating a model, evaluating and tuning a model, testing a model, integrating, monitoring, and needless to say, the pre-training during the plugin installation time itself, right? So all these different stages, we are able to kind of use that familiar guided paths and work through it. Now, what we are doing for Paris was to support 4 flows, essentially through guided setup. If we are able to generate a pre-trained model, or if we want the customer to go through this implementation journey, and also through documentation for rest of the use cases, which we could not take on due to time constraints.
Are you going to expand the number of guided setups?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea is we want to really have this tool as an avenue where our product managers, as they are dreaming of these newer use cases to enable this ML AI transformation for their customers, come up with all these different use cases. And we want to stand behind that and make sure we make that implementation much faster and have the customer focus more on the business outcomes that they want to start. So absolutely, yes, we will.
We'll expand that. Okay, well, good. This sounds like kind of an interesting extension to the whole guided setup idea. Now, I'm familiar with guided setup with other apps where once you activate the plugin and you're really getting started, that's when guided setup helps you. But it sounds like you guys are expecting users to use guided setup continuously going forward as they implement new models. Is that
Well
right?
said. Yeah, no, well said, actually. So, one part of this whole guided setup thing is the initial configuration, but we are using the same interface because now they have gotten through this process and this is a familiar interface. And we want to use that while the model is in production, monitoring that use case, making sure the models are performing to the expected efficacy that can meet that business goal. And also, as they are doing that quickly and readily, help the process owner communicate to their stakeholders on the value it's bringing to the corporation, right? So those are some things, and this will be an ongoing thing, not just for initial configuration. Yes.
Okay. And one other thing that I'm curious about, evaluating the efficacy of your model. Is it the guided setup? Does that help them do that as well? Or is that or another feature that helps them evaluate efficacy?
So once the model is deployed, we have a different feature within the tool to monitor all those models. So we have a monitoring functionality, and we define something like called an underperforming model, right? So we have certain thresholds, and if the model is not achieving those thresholds, we tag them as an underperforming model. So all the process owner or an ML champion needs to do is click on it and see where the model is not performing. Essentially, go to a dashboard view, and looking at it, they will be able to either tweak those underperforming thresholds or retrain a model or do the necessary tuning to make sure certain business groups or assignment groups can be filtered out.
Okay, so it identifies models that have issues and guides them then in improving them.
Absolutely. While we are doing that, we also talk about what are the typical best practices in tuning.
Okay. We were talking about the product is supplied with certain models designed to meet common applications, common use cases. Can they modify those to tailor them to their own businesses?
Yeah, when you say modify, right, we are doing it in two parts. Actually, it has two parts to the story there. One is the underperformance that I just talked about. But as we treat each model as an experiment, right? So what we say is, okay, let's start off this experiment and make sure we get a particular model. Now, the process or the implementer, ML champion, is communicating with the stakeholder and either tweaking that model or maybe creating one more model, right? So each model, since it's an experiment, the way we go about is we say, let's make sure we track those experiments. Let's make sure we get the best experiment upfront, which is the best model surface readily to the user. And there again, we have certain features where we can identify that. And then when they roll out, they know that this is the best model for the job, and they are able to also see what were the other models they had to go through before they landed on this.
So it sounds like experimentation, constant iteration. That's just a feature of this product.
Absolutely. And that's kind of core to machine learning, right? You want to have a machine learning solution which is typically allowing you to experiment and ensure the best model is deployed in the environment.
Yes, and then it stays up to date by reacting to changes that are identified from the data.
Yeah, absolutely. At least it'll alert the customer that there are changes, you got to act on it.
Well, then I understand there's a whole nother side to this machine learning, and that's the performance analytics. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So with data and machine learning, insights is always key place, right? And performance analytics is our tool to surface those insights and communicate the business value through the dashboards. So essentially, we have three different tabs of the dashboard. The first one is to do with communicating the business value and being able to customize these metrics to each customer's environment. We seed some metrics out of the box like MTTR, average cost of the incident, or CSAT and things like that. But the customers can always modify it to what they would like to. And the second tab is really the monitoring part that I talked about, right? So that'll tell you typically how many predictions are correct, how well is the model doing as opposed to what it was supposed to do, how many are incorrect, how many have been skipped, and that'll help the customer tune these models back and make sure they stay current. And the final one is to do with the training model stats, right? So which is once the model is trained, how many assignment groups can be predicted? How many are excluded in this training, right? How well is the data distributed across assignment groups? Things like that.
So PI Workbench, you're just introducing this now as a new product. Do you have some sense for how it's going to work out with our customers? I mean, it sounds like you are responding to feedback that you've heard. What's your prediction for these early stages?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, and I think I don't have a crystal ball there, but obviously what I can say from my initial validation and the team with different customers is that we did extensive concept testing and some beta testing after the product was released internally. So what we can say is we made that special effort to really listen to the customers along the way. And we got a big thumbs up, especially with respect to how we are able to streamline this process, how we are able to kind of get that confidence in each step of the way and suggest those number of improvements along the way, really. So what I can say is the initial validation, it was pretty clear that this will be the missing bridge to leverage the value from their pro investments for the customers. And also it will be it's a good bridge to collaborate between the stakeholders and ML champions for enabling that quick implementation. Those two are something that clearly we can see customer will use it for. And then deliver the value on a continual basis and make that automation black box more transparent, right? So when the model is there, all is, a model is trained and it is activated, but exactly what's happening, when should I intervene, and things like that are not very articulated in the current product, and we are making that black box more transparent. Yeah, so I mean, the one other thing I can say is we have a good roadmap for the product, so that gives me a high degree of confidence that it should resonate well as the product evolves in the next couple of releases.
Okay, that's certainly encouraging. And this is feedback from people who've been trying to use PI for a while, right? So they have some expertise and they know what they're talking about.
Absolutely. Yep. They have gone through the pain points. They've articulated it. It was very refreshing to really, go back to them and test those concepts. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. Well, we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, suppose I'm a customer, and how would I get started using PI Workbench?
So actually, PI Workbench kind of starts by itself. And what I mean by that is when you request for an activation of the plugin, PI Workbench is actually starting to analyze your data right there as the plugin install process and automatically creates those pre-trained models I talked about using the auto-train functionality we have. Now, if the model is good and like the customer is using an out-of-box implementation for assignment group, let's say, they can just directly drop it into their workflow with the no-code integration. So it starts by itself, really, and then they can always make those improvements and all the advanced functionality we just talked about.
Okay. Well, you've given us a good glimpse of this new product here. Is there anything else you wanted to add about it?
No, I think I would say we have pretty good documentation, both in terms of embedded help and the documentation for each use case. With this product, we are typically we get these technology platform or capabilities up, but with this product, we are actually giving that implementation guidance. And I feel like going through the product documentation and embedded help will make it much easier for the customers as they go along.
Okay, good. So this does make use of that embedded help. I know we're trying to spread that more throughout our product.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. This has been a very enlightening look at the product.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve. It was great to talk about the product and tell our customers, how this is going and where it will land. So,
all right. Well, best of luck with the product, and we'll check back with you and see how it's doing another release or so.
Yep. Thank you, Steve. Take care.
Please tell us what you think of this podcast. You can leave feedback or ask questions in the ServiceNow community. For more information on any ServiceNow topic, take a look at our product documentation, knowledge base, or ServiceNow support YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.